Today, we're really excited to have Anne-Marie Anderson, 3-time award-winning broadcaster, keynote speaker, and MC. Over the course of her television career, she has covered 6 Olympic Games, NBA and Major League Baseball playoffs, the Super Bowl, golf majors, heavyweight fights, and professional sports leagues around the world. Welcome, Anne-Marie.
Thank you. It looks like you've been on Wiki. Okay.
Got the notes from the girls.
Yeah.
We're so happy to have you on here because not just because of your established resume, but I just feel like you've made such a name for women in sports broadcasting too. And so I would love to kind of just hear the initial story of how you even got into it and like what interested you from the start and more or less kind of what inspired you.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here and just talk with you guys. So the thing about sports broadcasting, when I look back now, I'm really doing a combination of the two things I loved the most as a child, right? I loved sports, and my 4 older brothers would tell you that I was a world-class tattletale. So like sports reporting like makes perfect sense now. That's all I did. And because I had those 4 older brothers, we just watched sports growing up. And there's stuff that I would find, you know, when my early days producing at ESPN in the back of my head that I didn't even know I had. Like I'd be like, the Broncos won in 1977. Their defense was called the Orange Crush. Oh my God, where'd that come from? Kind of thing. So I always knew what I wanted to do in terms of be a journalist. I did not want to go into news. It was too depressing. And I didn't want to go into entertainment because I didn't have to worry about what I look like or my weight or any of that stuff. Like I wanted a little more substance. So I got lucky enough to get an interview at ESPN. Shortly out of college, somebody came and talked to our school, and he said they hire like these 6-month at that time, 6-month temporary production assistants. And so you could just get your feet wet a little bit, like no medical benefits, 6 days a week, barely any money. But I was like, perfect. So I went up to Connecticut. I borrowed a car, went up to Connecticut. I had nothing, interviewed for the job. And when I sat down with this man named Al Jaffe, he asked me, can you like analyze the Mariners bullpen for me? And I was like, no, I cannot in any way. And he's like, well, do you know anybody in the Mariners? And I was like, no, I don't. I never really like recovered from that question. It shocked me so much that I didn't get the job. He said, thanks very much for coming, but you're not what we're looking for. And I was like, drove back, returned the car. And then I just thought, no. Plus, I did not want to go home and live with my parents. So there was no plan B. Whenever I talk to people, I talk about plan A. If you've got a plan B, do that. It's easier, for sure, always. So, but I just have literally never had one. So I wrote him a letter. Back in those days, we wrote with a pen and paper. And I licked a stamp. As unsanitary as that seems now, I like licked a stamp and put it on there. And I sent it to him and I said, thanks so much for your time. Unfortunately, I don't feel it showcased my strengths very often. You have probably a million guys who can spit out those stats, but I've already worked in television because in college we used to rent our studio out and I would do all those things. And so I can bring something different, some kind of like really nervy letter. And then, because what do I have to lose, right? I'm 21. Like I read that now and I'm like, oh God, I kept it. But the last line said, and if I needed to do a story on the Mariners bullpen, I'd look it up. And thanks. And he called me and hired me. And it took off from there. Yeah.
It goes to show that just kind of like really sticking your name out there, putting yourself out there is going to, you're going to reap benefits from that.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah. As I look back, that's kind of been the key to my whole career. It's what I call audacity, right? Willingness to take like really bold risks. And that's what I talk about a lot. And so I did that again and again and again in my career. And I still do it. It always works out, honestly, always.
Do you think your brothers had an influence on this? Because you said you had 4 brothers.
Uh-huh.
So where did you kind of learn that boldness?
So that's something I'm trying to explore right now as I share it with other people. It is not my brothers, though they want to claim every bit of success that I've had. And they were really mad when I changed my name when I got married. They were like, wow, you're on ESPN doing college football. Now nobody knows. I was like, it's not about you. I think it comes maybe from being the youngest. I've actually, Kelly, really kind of explored this a bunch and trying to think about it. And I'll get like super deep, like right away on you, but I'm recently divorced, and my ex-husband and I are good friends. But I was thinking about, like, why did it take me so long to get divorced? A friend pointed this out to me, when I could change my job all the time, because I changed it, as a production assistant, associate producer, college football. Yeah, I just kept changing it. And a good friend asked me, like, why did you have no fear about changing that constantly? And yet about your marriage, you just kept going, even when you both knew that it wasn't the right thing. And what I recently have come to realize is I was so attached to the outcome of the marriage, as you should be, right? I'm like, I don't want to fail. We can do this. We're going to work it out and this and that, even though we knew we'd be better like this as friends and really close co-parents. So then I looked back at the career stuff and I was like, I was never attached to the outcome. I would always, like, when I moved, I was in Connecticut, and then I wanted to be LA bureau producer. And my boss said no. And he said, we already have somebody in LA. And I said, I know, that's what makes this so awkward. And he's like, I tell you what, wait 2 years. And I was 26 at the time. And if we haven't made you LA bureau producer by then, what have you really lost? And I said, 2 years in my 20s. And I'm going to give my notice. And he was like, oh, you're so impatient. I'm like, totally. Yes, I agree. And I moved cross country here to Manhattan Beach. And when I arrived, first of all, it was Surf Fest. And I thought it was like that all the time here. It was Surf Fest weekend. I was freaking out, like, oh my God, it's volleyball heaven. But when I arrived here, I got hired back in what ended up being double the salary.
Wow.
Yeah. And so again, it's another audacious decision or risk.
Well, I mean, and now you've been out here. You just said that you did a bunch of other things like production too, and
yeah. When I started ESPN, I was a production assistant, right? Yeah. 6 days a week, 6 at night to 3 in the morning, Mondays off, that kind of thing, for $15,000 a year. Like, where you go on a date and you eat half your meal and you bring home the other half so you can eat the next day. And
meal prepping at its finest.
Yeah, exactly. And so then I was an associate producer, feature producer there. I won a few Emmys there. And that was all for behind the scenes work. And then I came out to LA to be a bureau producer, which was the best job in the world. It's like being Forrest Gump. Like, wherever the big story is, that's where you go. And whether it's the O.J. Simpson trial or, the Olympic Games or whatever, golf's majors, it was unbelievable job, so fun, and worked with great people, and was in that until I decided I wanted to go on air. And then it was just more audacious risks.
What was your first time on air like? What was that experience like?
So my first time on air was college football. And here's the deal. I got hired to so I already worked for ESPN for 10 years, but I wanted to go on air and I didn't know how to do that. And so I sent my resume to like this regional part of ESPN, and I didn't know that everything was so closely connected. So when I sent it, this guy was like, oh, I'd like to hire her. He sends it to his boss. His boss and I were partners in a wedding like a month before. And he was like, why didn't you tell me? I'm like, I didn't know this is what you do. And he's like, I didn't know that's what you wanted to do. We had known each other. And so they hired me for regional football. And then one of the women in the business, a coworker, got pregnant and she was going to be missing these games. And let me tell you, all that stuff about like women competing, it's all crap. I have the best women friends in this business and we look out for each other. So she called me and she was like, listen, I'm about to back out of these games. Give them a call in 5 minutes and everything. And so I called like 5 minutes later. Hey, I'm available if you guys have anything else. Oh my God. Yes, actually we do. We just have like these 6 games on ESPN2 for you. So before I'd ever been on air, my games were now going to be on ESPN2 and not on this regional thing. I was freaking out. I wouldn't tell anybody. My husband made me tell my father. Because he's like, you have to tell your, I was like, okay, but I'm not telling my brothers. I'm not telling anybody else. This is not going to be good. I'm crying outside the stadium beforehand to my husband. And he was like, what is the worst that could happen? Like, you've got to calm down. This is why I love him. Like, he's really like, and I said, I could be so bad at this that no one will ever take my direction producing again. Because I produced, for Chris Berman or Robin Robertson. I was like, they will know how bad I am at their job and they'll never take my direction again. And I'll lose my entire career. And he's like, wow, like you really went there.
Thought of the worst.
On that. And so I was just a mess. I went on and you know what? I was terrible because you're going to be terrible your first time on. But I went on again and again and again and eventually got better.
Man, yeah, practice makes perfect.
Well, definitely not perfect.
Well, so I'm curious what the landscape looked like when you were first, in ESPN the first 10 years to what it looks like now as far as women are concerned. Because obviously you said, like you had a good support system and you guys all looked out for each other.
Right.
But I'm curious to see like what it was like then versus it is now.
Oh, great question, because it has changed so much. I think there were somewhere around 7 women in all of Sports Center when I came in. Most of us are still really closely in touch today. One is a stud NFL producer. Like we're all pretty tight. And in those days, there was a lot of sexism. Not that there isn't now, but it was like very overt. They would have on the monitors in the newsroom at night porn.
Oh, wow.
Playing. Yep.
Wow.
Yeah. And so it would come down to like, Anne-Marie, I'm going to need some Magic Johnson sound at 3:00. What do you think? Is that going to happen? Sexual thing before they reach 80 points. Like it was bad. We had a new boss come in and change that. Thank goodness. The year after I got there, but it was pretty crazy. Obviously none of that would fly now. There's a lot of women. More of them are getting to positions of power, which is really important. Stephanie Drulli is a huge presence at the network in charge of the NFL. She and I were PAs together back when there were only 7 of us, and she's such a stud, and we're all super proud of her. So now many more women in many more positions, and then in many different roles, right? I mean, if you want to be in front of the camera, then you were a sideline reporter. You weren't a play-by-play announcer, and that's, one of the things that I and some other colleagues of mine pushed for.
Yeah, we had Cameron Irwin on not too long ago, and she talked about her first play-by-play experience too, and how now she's doing that, which is so great to see, just so many more women doing that. What about from like a diversity standpoint too? Because I think that's like, obviously super apparent and important now. I mean, it's always been important, but, I feel like the landscape has changed a little bit there too.
Right. Are you talking, well, in every way, right?
Yes. Yeah. Diversity in everywhere. Yeah.
In every way. So again, when I started ESPN, it was 1989 and, long time ago. And, it was all those things that you think, not very diverse. I was talking to one of my friends who I was a PA with, and he pointed out, did you realize I was the only black man in the newsroom? And I was like, oh, other than John Saunders, who was on the air. But it just, I never really noticed that. But he was like, oh, yeah, it was weird. And then certainly in terms of sexuality, nobody talked about it at all. So I don't even know if any of my colleagues or which of my colleagues then were gay, bisexual, trans, whatever, because you just did not talk about that. And all of that has opened up. Still a really long way to go. But if you look at women in broadcasting now, you're seeing women anchor shows. You're seeing women of color anchor shows, all kinds of things. I think the next big thing is disabled. I think we haven't gotten to any part where disabled people are getting those roles. So we've made some strides, but I think there's a lot to go.
Yeah, always room for improvement, I would say. What about, like, let's get a little fun with this. What's your favorite sport to cover?
I don't have one.
You don't?
I don't. Everybody asks. People around here swear that it's volleyball. I know you liked volleyball the best. You can tell me. I don't, because here's the deal. First of all, I can't do anything anymore. I played volleyball, but I can't do anything at a high level anymore except broadcast, hopefully. And so I love seeing people compete at their best. And if I'm doing softball, I love the atmosphere outside, and basketball, I love the speed, and I love everybody bumping up against each other. I couldn't do that because if somebody touched me, I punched them back, and I fouled out of every game I ever played in. But I respect what they're doing, and I'm like, oh, look at the emotional control they have. And then volleyball, the same thing, water polo. So I really love whatever I'm in.
What sport do you want to do that you haven't covered yet?
The next one that has a lot of work. I don't know. I turned down pickleball recently just because I was too booked, but I think that's going to explode. And I turned them down like 4 times. I was overbooked, but I would like that one because it's going to be huge.
How do you mentally prepare for all of these different disciplines of sport?
I don't know if I mentally prepare for it.
Do you physically prepare?
I was going to say physically, I prepare for it. So first of all, ideally, with a high level network, you've got a partner with you who's an analyst, right? So in this case, right, if I'm calling a volleyball match, I would have one of these two as my partner. And then it is about knowing the questions to ask. Because what I tell people, and I run workshops, as Kelly knows, I think, for aspiring broadcasters and stuff. But what I tell people is the play-by-play's job is to set up the analyst. I'm not the star of the show. I shouldn't be, and I don't want to be. I want to set her up to show what she knows. And what's really fun for me is when, for water polo, for example, I don't know as much about water polo as I do some of the other sports. So I called a friend of mine who is Tony Azevedo. He's a 5-time water polo Olympian, most decorated person. I wrote an article on him for ESPN, the magazine, because I did all that too when he was like 19. And he happens to coach my son. So I called him and I was like, hey, do you want to be on television, whatever? And he's like, I'd like to try it out. What's really fun is that we're there. I said, are you nervous before he went on? He's like, very. And I said, cool. That you should be. Right? Because you haven't done television before. Here's the thing. I haven't done water polo before, so I got a little nerves too. Between us, we make a whole person. And then as we're calling the game, I'm learning at the same time, right? Because I'm asking questions. And then Tony, I remember at one point said, they're going to put that ball through set over here and then swing it around, and he's going to score probably a skip shot. And 14 seconds later, that's what happened. And I was like, dude, like, if you knew that 14 seconds ago, why did they not stop that? And he's like, because I played in 5 Olympics and there it is. But like, I'm learning with the audience for some of those sports.
Yeah.
Are there any other instances where you've had, like a top tier athlete that's played the sport that you've been able to kind of learn from as well? Like others?
I think I do always.
Always, yeah.
I think I do always. My softball partners are Olympians. Mm-hmm. As well, that I do. I partner a lot with Holly McPeak on beach volleyball and indoor volleyball, and who's going to be better to talk about it than that. Everybody I learned from. It's a bummer for me if I get somebody who doesn't know the sport as well as I do. Yeah, that shouldn't happen. The analyst needs to be knowledgeable in their sport. I can help with the TV part, but you got to know the sport.
What about like advice for preparation on your own? Because obviously I know you probably, like if you were doing pickleball or water polo, these sports that you maybe haven't done, like what's your preparation look like?
First of all, watch it.
Yeah.
A lot of it. Watch it. Listen to the terminology that people use. You can tell. I mean, you guys can tell when somebody is doing a volleyball match and they don't know the sport. They'll say things like spike. But like... I know. Well, no, it's okay. We say that, but like you don't hear that very much.
Totally. Yeah.
God forbid they say bump. You're like, get out. Kind of thing. Is that hurt too?
Hit the road, Kelly.
Yeah. Oh, you're fired.
Exactly. But you know what I'm saying?
Upset, spike it. That's the way we like it.
I mean, it's just except Kelly. Like maybe you look her up and then you're like, okay, she actually knows the sport.
I provide the entertainment sometimes.
I don't know why she's talking like that, but yeah, exactly.
Comedy.
That's funny. Yeah. Well, it's all, preparation is good. I know, just like as athletes too, it's like we study opponents we're going to play. And I'm sure you probably could provide good scouting reports on teams too.
Yep. Yep. I always love going, if the coach will let me into film, whether it's basketball, softball, or indoor volleyball, and I go into film and I'm just in the back listening to what the coach is trying to tell her or his team. And then I call the match and they don't do it. It's amazing. It's so fun because I'll be like, man, we just talked about this in film last night and there they are not doing it. Like you make eye contact with the coach. I don't know, across the way.
What do you enjoy most about the preparation process to like broadcast a sporting event? Is it like being in practice, sitting in film, getting to know the team, or is it actually producing?
Interesting. So I'm a social person, and since I moved to Manhattan Beach in 1994, that's when I made that move with ESPN. I haven't gone to an office since then, ever.
Wow.
Yeah. And so that's my office. So I just really like interacting with people. And I love the coach calls, because when I talk to the coach, I get an idea of what should be happening, and I'll usually ask some version of that question, like what should be happening. And then I can tell if it's going to happen, if it's not happening. And then I really enjoy seeing the moves, the adjustments that are made, whether it's a player making an adjustment or a coach making an adjustment to the game plan.
On those calls with the coaches, have your questions always been the same, or are you constantly like changing up the tactics as far as like asking questions to the coaches?
Right. Great question. And that's another thing, right, that's in that workshop, is like you have to do all these steps before you get there, in terms of, I always tell people, like, if you get on a call with a coach and say, tell me about your team, do not tell them you've taken my workshop, because I'll kill you. Because you have to do all these things first and have a really good idea of tendencies and stats and what you're seeing. And then I will always end with the same question. Is there anything I haven't asked you about, or any storylines that you feel like I'm missing? Right? People tend to really like that. And once in a while you'll get a nugget. The questions always change. The first and the last are always the same. The first question is always, anybody on your roster injured, redshirting, or otherwise unavailable? Because I want to get them off the list. And if you don't ask that question, their star point guard could be out, but they're not going to tell you unless you ask it.
You missed a scoop then.
No.
You heard it here first.
There you go.
Yeah.
What about the social media? Like, social media landscape has obviously changed sports broadcasting, everything. And so how has that affected your approach?
So first of all, I'm so glad that there was no social media when I started at ESPN, because nobody cared what I looked like or, how clever. It was just about the work that I put in. And I think that's just an added pressure, especially for women in sports broadcasting. Now, I don't know who made the rules. I know who made the rules. Some men made the rules in terms of what female sportscasters are supposed to look like, right? That's another hurdle that we're working towards. Why does it matter? I mean, have you seen the guys? Come on. Especially like when they're my age, come on, so
I agree.
yeah, I don't know who's making those rules. So I'm glad that was not a part of things. I am on Instagram. I'm really getting off of Twitter, right? Like, what's the point anymore?
Yeah, it's like no more.
Yeah, I just took them off my website. But Instagram, I'll do threads. I don't know. Okay, I'll do that stuff because I have to, right? But it is a great way for somebody who is building their career to kind of get a following, and that does matter to the networks. You know what I mean? Like, I don't have a big following, but I've got a big resume. So it kind of balances out.
It's unfortunate because it's like same with us as athletes, right?
Yeah.
Like, I want to just go out on the court and perform and be my best.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to have to worry about making this post for this sponsor. But like at the same time, we still do, and we have to. It's like the number that you have on Instagram is very dependent upon what you can ask from sponsors.
That's right.
Compensation.
Exactly.
And so, yeah, so it's, I mean, granted, like I love my sponsors and I'm happy to promote them and the way, like when I rep them, when I play and stuff, but yeah, it's just like, it's an added thing that we have to worry about. That's not really, it's a necessary evil.
Right.
That's the way I like to.
And how do you get big numbers, right? Showing your body, saying controversial things, those kinds of things. So now maybe you're outside being authentic. That's the thing that bothers me about it, is maybe you're not that woman who would in her personal life be showing her body and this and that, but now you are. And then what happens when that fades? Like that for sports broadcasters, different from athletes, that's what worries me a lot about the ones who are showing so much of a physical attribute side. It's going to go away. It is. And what are you left with there in terms of the core?
Yeah. Maybe I should start posting myself in not bikini, you know.
No, you're a player. Yeah,
I know,
exactly.
I know. But yeah, it's really tough. And it sucks that men did make it this way that we need to, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's all
No, we can change the rules.
yeah.
We're changing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
we are.
I was going to ask, like, how do you make yourself marketable online as a sports broadcaster? You know, because if there's this physical side of it, sure, but then like vocally, there's such a fine line with what the audience wants to hear versus your personal opinion. Do you cross that line? Do you go, well, I'm going to provide my personal opinion and also share what I think the audience wants to hear?
No, because I'm a play-by-play announcer, right? So I'm calling the action. So as a play-by-play, I'm calling what's happening,
Yeah.
right? And then the analyst would talk about how and why. So that's a time to put in the opinions, and it comes from the analyst. What I think they need to do here is this and that and the other thing. Occasionally, especially in a sport like volleyball that I know very, very well, having played, I'll have a discussion with an analyst and ask, well, what about if the right back defender moves over because they're getting beat net side? And what do you think about that? Or, you know, we'll have a discussion about that. But my own personal opinions, pull the setter, no, I don't. I think it, but I don't share
Can't
it.
say it. Yeah.
Yeah.
What about online on Instagram or Twitter or Threads or something?
No, because again, if I did, that'd be great, right? Because that would be controversial and
Yeah.
build that following. I don't care about my following. Like at this point,
Yeah.
I love to have conversations, but the numbers, I think my kids would be horrified if can you imagine? Like
Just
I showed
unfiltered,
myself.
raw.
Oh, well, unfiltered and raw. Like I'm going to get there someday, but not working for anybody. Like when I don't know if I'm ever going to retire, but if I do, then I'm going to tell you what I think. Yeah. I'll let it fly.
Yeah. What about when you did start to have a family? Because
Yes.
obviously were they supportive of that? Like how was that whole process for you? Like because I know it's tough being a woman in this industry too. You probably wanted to put yourself first in a lot of situations with your career, but then yet you have 3 kids, right? Like
Right.
how was that? Because I know I'm assuming it was hard.
It's rough.
Yeah.
Were they supportive? You mean work or my family? My family loved me having a family.
Yeah, we have I work.
The kids are big on being born. Work. I mean, here's the thing. When I was a young producer, I had a reporter I worked with a lot named Shelley Smith. She's a very accomplished reporter for ESPN. She had a young daughter, and I learned so much watching her. And people ask me all the time as they're starting their family, like, how do you do it? Like, how does it work, right? Nobody ever asks the dads, how do you balance, Bob, having a family and your career? I'm waiting for that question. I'm going to ask that question of somebody at some point. How do you balance being a dad and a professional? Because, we get it all the time. And what I learned from Shelley was like, you just do. And my job at the time that I had Luke, my firstborn, who just left for college on Friday, I'm okay. I'm not.
You don't have any tissues.
I'm so not okay. No, but when I don't really need tissues. We know that, right?
No,
it's a
I'm
dog.
just making sure
Therapy
Murphy's
dog
okay.
down there. My job at the time was breaking news, right? So, like, for example, when Kobe Bryant got into trouble in Colorado, I got a call in the morning, and I lived in San Francisco at the time, and I was San Francisco bureau producer at that point because I did it again, the LA thing. When my husband got a job in San Francisco, I said, hey, I need to be San Francisco bureau producer. And he said, we already have one. I was like, I know, we've had this conversation before. And they made me San Francisco bureau producer. And my boss said, get in the car, call me. You go to the airport. And so I was in there, and he was like, look, Kobe Bryant's been accused of something. You need to go. And I spent 17 months in Vail at that point. So can't do that once you have kids. And we moved that way for my husband's job. And I said to my boss, we should have a bureau in Denver. And he's like, whatever, just same boss. He's like, whatever, go, fine. And at that point, when I had Luke, I needed to change that because I couldn't be on call. And that is actually when I started doing full-time play-by-play and left producing altogether. Because producing breaking news was awesome and very Forrest Gumpish, like whatever the issue was, but really hard to plan and really hard on my husband. So games, I'm going to be gone these dates. He could plan his stuff and we worked it out.
That's good. I mean, I know it's still demanding though, being a sports broadcaster and all the sports and events that you do.
Yeah.
How do you have balance in your life, or what is like?
I don't do a very good job of the balance thing. I don't know.
What does me time then look for you?
This is it.
Yes, on a
how we doing?
Great.
I'm having a great time.
Yeah. Okay, couple things. One, I get me time on the road, especially when I'm working with Holly McPeak or Nicole Branna. That's like a boondoggle. In fact, we have a text chain called Boondoggle or Bust. Whenever we get an assignment together, we're like, okay, Holly, where are we eating? She figures out the food of where we're going. What are we doing for our workout? Okay. And I'll be in charge of like the coach stuff. And so I get a lot there because I want to be with my kids when I'm home. And then this summer, I was traveling around the world, literally, for Volleyball World, calling Volleyball Nations League, professional volleyball national teams. And when they offered me the job, and they said, okay, what countries do you want to go to? And here it is. And I said, I'll go to these things. I can take 5 weeks of work. Can I bring my daughter? She's 11. And they said, absolutely.
Wow.
So cool.
Oh my
It was
God.
really cool. I love them. 2 men, right, who I was on a Zoom call with. And they said, absolutely. And the CEO, Finn Taylor, he's amazing, and said, yeah, I bring my son sometimes. And I said, great. Can she be fully credentialed? Because I don't want her in Brazil, like not being able to be with me. And so they credentialed her fully. She came with me. Turkey was amazing. I should have brought her to Turkey. But something about school. They have to go to school until they're 13. So she came to Brazil and the Netherlands with me, and it was fantastic. And it was so important for her to see. We did 1 week of women, 1 week of men. And so she got to see women
amazing.
handling their lives like a boss. And then Anaheim was another week, and my 18-year-old son and his friends came down for that. And so I brought my kids to work a lot over the years. And for my oldest son, who's now going to be playing volleyball in college, it paid off. He's been coming with me since he was 3. He has seen a lot of volleyball. And apparently some of it's soaked in.
Do you think you'll call one of his matches this coming season?
Not this coming season, because I don't know if Loyola Chicago's on TV. I also don't know if I want to. Well, I mean,
That's when the opinions come out.
Yeah.
right. So, and there's 2 different ways you could go, right? With that, you could be like, oh, my son, he's so wonderful, blah, 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 which is probably not the way I would go. I would be like, beat on the right side, like we talked about since he was 14. But what do I know? Bend your knees, buddy. Okay, next service. So it's probably best if I'm just mom at that point. But
Would your daughter get into broadcasting maybe?
it's funny you say that. She's the one who might.
Okay.
Yeah, she's a little mini me. So that's, well, yeah, it could be good, but it also, I know who I am. So she's got really strong opinions. And her name is Lena. We call her last word Lena because she always has to have the last word. That's me. So she might.
It's so cool that these companies that you've worked for just are so willing and happy to provide that for you to get your kids on board and come along and follow
Incredible.
along. Yeah.
I really didn't expect it,
Yeah.
especially for this international one. And they were immediate, and they were calling me and sending me notes. How's everything going with your daughter? Are you totally taken care of?
So good.
It was amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was amazing.
And the fact that at the start they were like, which events do you want to go? Which
Yeah.
countries do you
That's
want to go
kinda cool.
to?
Yeah, that was cool. I mean, they wanted me. I picked something, and they were like, well, we want you to be with the USA team. And I'm like, oh, I get it. So I went there. And I'll point out too that they do that for the male colleagues as well. So again, Bob, how do you balance work and your career? The CEO brought his son to one of the weeks as well. So it isn't just one way, gender or not. It's so good for the kids
Yeah.
to be with one or the other parent, in my opinion.
It's great. I want to learn a little bit more about the workshops that you do and how people, if they're interested, can look into it, or what the workshops entail.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Thanks for asking.
Yeah.
Because I just announced a new one starting August 16th. What it is, it's 3 sessions virtually. And the big thing when you get a job, right, or to get a job, you need to know how to prepare. And I've had so many athletes as partners who haven't prepared. and they don't last long, right? They come, they think I know the game, I'm good. Here's a roster. It's not the way. So the first session, it's an hour and a half virtually, we go over preparation, big time, where to find the things that you need, who to call before you ever get on with a coach, and then the template that you use to prepare your notes. I give you as part of the tuition templates to use that you can use throughout your career. I have a couple of colleagues of mine who have sent theirs as well, giving me permission to share so you can experiment and find what you want to do in terms of templates. We talk about the coach call, what you want to ask, how you want to ask it, everything you need to know. There's a certain color coding system I use, and I share that and encourage people. And after that session, I ask you, make a board and send it to me. And I will go over it and we'll go back and forth to make sure you really know how to do it. And then a week or two later, we'll do the second session. I think for the one, I think it's August 16th and 30th this time. And the second session is I'm play-by-play, you're sideline, you're analyst. How do these roles go together so that you can dance? Here's the top two mistakes that analysts most often make and how to get around them. Here's the top complaint about play-by-plays. Here's how sideline can add value. Here's what you shouldn't do. And then I asked my friends who are executives at networks, CBS, TBS, Big Ten, and ESPN, what are you looking for when you hire somebody? And they sent me these long, I expected like a couple of things, literally like full page, single spaced about the things that they want and not. So I share that with the students as well. And then the third session is a one-on-one. So that can be anything you want. Sometimes people will send me tape of things they've done before. I take notes on it beforehand. We get on for a half hour, go through that. A lot of people, almost everybody wants some career planning in that. And I've had so many students get jobs. I'm so excited. It's like having another kid when they call and they're like,
that's so cool.
I got a job, yeah. Yeah. And I got a call from one's boss, which was really fun because I've never worked for that person. And he called and he's like, his boards are amazing. And he said, and I was like, well, thank you very much. Yeah, he's killing it.
So can people find that on your website?
Yeah, they can do it two different ways. They can always message me on Instagram, Anne-Marie Anderson TV. They can email me at ama@annemarieanderson.com. Or on my website, there's a button there that you can click.
Anybody who's listening who's interested in this career needs to take this workshop.
You gonna do it?
I think it would be fun to kind of join in on a workshop just to kind of see behind the scenes of like what goes on. It's always good to just learn, other trades. But
yeah, we had Kelly do a play-by-play commentary for a match. It was Gina's match, actually.
Oh, is that right?
She sat sideline, and I was, because at the AVP event, you have the inside the box, and
I'll have to send you the tape so you can give me some feedback.
There we go. Yeah, that's the way that it goes. Did you have a partner?
No, it was just me and then our camera guy, and I was just doing live feedback or whatever.
Well, yeah, we were thinking it'd be like a fun idea. Like
yeah.
I did it for Kelly's match for one, and it was kind of like, okay, she's my best friend. I'm gonna, give her some crap and
yeah. I was like just commentating the match, and then I would throw some jokes in about Gina because I can because she's my best friend.
But the feedback was great. Yeah. Everyone loved it.
Yeah,
really engaged.
It wasn't like ESPN material by any means,
but
you're giving insight, and then the fact that you use some humor is huge.
Yeah,
always. Some people get there and they're so nervous and they just don't want to make a mistake and be totally perfect, and it just makes people uncomfortable to listen to.
Yeah,
it was fun. I enjoyed it.
Good job.
Good.
Maybe I'll do it again sometime. I don't know.
Yeah, if you want to do it as a career, like I'd suggest the workshop because then we're teaching you all the preparation and stuff. And as you know, I call a lot of games by myself because some of the networks are going that way.
Yeah.
Have a lot of like beach volleyball athletes expressed interest to you? Because I know the NCAAs this year, it was like the biggest one yet.
Yeah.
And I feel like there were some athletes that were on the sidelines from you. I can't remember the girl's name. She's from Florida State. Curly hair.
She was on the
sideline
reporter.
Yeah.
Yes, I don't know her name either.
I was just curious if any like beach athletes would want to get into that.
I've had a few in my classes. I'll keep everybody private, but I've had some big names come through it. Yeah. And I love them because they're, hardworking when I get those athletes. Coaches are also really great as analysts. Really great, because then they're seeing things. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
I see that in the NBA. I feel like there are, like, for example, like Draymond when he goes on ESPN, or who's the other guy? Forget JJ Redick.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he gets on and then he went from a player to being
Yeah.
an analyst. He's so good at it, and now
Yeah.
he has his own podcast and stuff.
I mean, Troy Aikman in the
Yeah.
NFL. It's there's plenty.
yeah.
Now we just need more women.
Now we need more women.
Yeah.
But that's coming too. I mean,
Yes.
obviously my workshop's about half and half, men and women. I've had 2 of my students become my partner on a couple of broadcasts, which was also super fun.
Right, that's so fun.
Super fun. Natasha Watley, who's an Olympic gold medalist for softball, and she came in and she's like, I'm a little nervous. And I said, no, don't be. She took out her notes. I'm like, nice looking board, Tosh. That's good. Here it is. But the thing is, and I also have another couple of students who've been paired up on a broadcast. And what was great about that is that they're speaking the same language. So then they know, here's what's happening. Now you're talking about how and why. Here are the words you're using to start the replay. I get super specific in terms of how to do it. And then when you're working with somebody else who's taken it, it's a pretty good show.
How have you dealt with like adversity when you're calling a match? Like, let's say there's a tech malfunction or something in the crowd happens. Like, what do you do in those moments?
Depends on what it is. When you said tech moment, I was thinking humor, but also had a really big brawl breakout recently. That's all I can tell you about that one. And, you ignore it because the cameras aren't going to show it. The big thing is, you pay attention to what's in the box. If anything's happening outside of the screen that the viewer can see, it doesn't happen. It doesn't exist.
So is it best to just like be silent when that's happening?
If there's a brawl,
Yeah.
well, I'm not going to talk about it because our cameras aren't going to show it. So I'm going to stay with whatever is on the screen. Whereas normally if I'm calling a game of any kind, I'm looking around the, arena. But if there's something bad happening, then I'm going to look at the screen so I know exactly what you're seeing at home, and I'm talking about just that. Technical problems, hello, is my mic on? Okay, well, forgive me if I'm repeating myself, but here it is. Yeah, like that's happened a million times. Or the prompter goes down. That was back when I was doing studio stuff, because we don't use prompters in the sidelines. And you just try to not freeze, at that moment. But I had already, because I was a producer, I had that happen. Do you guys know who Robin Roberts is? She's the anchor for Good Morning America.
Yes.
And she's Studley and this and that.
Amazing. Yeah.
So she and I worked together a lot. We went to a lot of Olympics together, and we were always kind of roommates. And I was producing for her at a Final Four, and the prompter went down. And Robin was still young. Like, she was just starting out in her career. And I kicked the guy out who was doing in the teleprompter stuff. I sat in and I said to Robin, you're on your own for the A block. I'll catch you at the B's. And so she's like working through, and she's a pro's pro, obviously, working through the A block. And then she's on the B's. Here I've got the prompter. So she's back to reading the prompter. And then she catches up to me, and I'm like, you're on your own. Come back. And, afterwards, it's funny.
It's like a whole fun dance that I don't even know about.
It is fun.
Yeah.
Though.
It's so cool.
I don't mind stress, right? I wouldn't have had 3 kids if I did. So, and I always tell people, like, you cannot distract me. I got 3 kids. One of them's ADHD. You get the ex-husband, people all over the place. Like, you can do anything and I won't get distracted. And I like the pressure of live. So I thrive in that chaos.
Yeah, those are some interesting. What other characteristics do you think it takes to be like a really good, successful,
resilient?
Yeah,
right. Don't give a vote to anybody that shouldn't have a voice. On social media, it's a great lesson. People are saying stuff on social media, maybe to you. Who are they? They're like sitting in the basement of their mother's house eating chips on the couch. Like, that's what they're doing. That's why they're criticizing you, and they haven't even pulled the curtains open yet to see the sunshine today. So
We call those people trolls.
yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
So, I mean, for me, they don't exist. Just resilience. I don't mind failing. I don't mind failing. In fact, I really encourage it when I'm talking to people, especially when I'm speaking. I say, you have got to put yourself in a position to fail early and often. get used to failing, especially if you're going to be in television. Oh my gosh. Do you know how many times I've been rejected? Holy cow. It's a joke to me now. And my kids have seen that growing up, and they've seen me react a couple of different ways to it. I mean, once I got on a plane when they told me I had a job and then I didn't, I was like, oh, hell no. And I got on a plane and I flew up to that boss and face to face and said, I just want you to know who you're not hiring and this and that. And then he ended up hiring me and everything. But they've also seen me go, dodged a bullet there. And they've seen me go, I'm super bummed about that one. And that's the way I feel, and I'm going to be fine. You know, all those different reactions are important.
I love that mentality. I'm definitely going to utilize some of that moving forward. And because, you know, in our career too.
Oh, yeah.
Just sport, you know, that's great.
Yeah.
And what's next for you?
Writing a book now. So I'm doing a lot of keynote speaking now, which is fun. I've always loved speaking, and then I started to get hired to speak to people about a few different things, and a lot of it is about the audacity that I was telling you. You know, it happened so many times, as I said, in my career. And once I look back and put it all together, I kind of identified, okay, what stops people from making those decisions? What kept me in the marriage, as I said, from making the decision to divorce? And it's always the same things, the same four things: fear, right? Not knowing where to start, being embarrassed. My head is blanking. And money. So it's money, time, fear of embarrassment, and not knowing how to start. It's always those four things. And they apply to sports broadcasting. They apply to, in my case, the marriage as well. And so as I'm speaking about that more and more people are saying, well, wait, tell me how to do that. And so I talk to them about finding a job that you love, that you're good at, that the world needs, and that you get paid for. And that sweet spot between all those things is mostly what I get hired to talk about. And that's kind of what the book will be about. How do you find that? And then how do you get rid of all your excuses as to why you can't do that? Because in 34 years, true story, I have never had a day I haven't wanted to go to work, ever.
That's great.
It's a blessing.
That's what everyone aspires for.
Yeah, it's a blessing. Lucky, but yeah.
Well, I can't wait for this book. I'm definitely going to buy it.
What's
and
it
read
called?
Thank you. I'm not sure yet. It'll probably be something like The Audacious Mindset. Something like that. Sound right?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Sounds amazing.
Great.
Sounds
Yeah.
great.
Yes.
All right. Well, good. Trying it out on you.
Audacious mind.
Yeah. I say it's a
Audacity.
willingness to take bold risks.
Yeah. And you've taken a lot, and it's totally shown in your whole career.
Yeah.
And that's so cool to see.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Some have worked, some haven't, right?
But
Some
you got to
things
fail
I'm bad at.
sometimes. You got to put yourself in the position to fail, like
Absolutely.
you said. Yeah. That's so
Absolutely.
cool.
What advice do you have for someone who might experience imposter syndrome?
That's such a good question, right? I think my ego is out of control, right? Because imposter syndrome is where you think you don't belong.
Right.
Yeah, I'm definitely like my ego's out of control because it's beyond my ability. And I think that it's about seeing that everybody else has the same vulnerabilities that you do. As I'm obviously joking about my ego, but I'm saying, like, why not me? So in terms of imposter syndrome, like, okay, if it's not going to be me, why not? Because I'm not good enough, especially for women. Oh, can we talk about that? Right? You have to have 100% of the qualifications to go after the job. Statistically, men, 60% of the qualifications to go after the job. Right? We all know those guys. They go into the bar and they ask out women that are way above their level and everything, but they ask out 10 until one woman says yes. Like that guy, it's the same thing in business. I'll go for that job and that job and that job and that job. And yet women don't apply. That's what we hear from leaders, is that women don't apply for those jobs because they're 100% qualified. So apply when you're 60% qualified for the job. Don't wait till you're ready, because you'll never be ready. So for somebody who feels like they don't belong, maybe stop projecting what you think other people are thinking or feeling, because they probably also are figuring it out for themselves.
Yeah. It's great advice.
Take notes.
I love that.
Is that
Yeah.
going to be in the book?
Maybe.
Should put that in.
Should I put that in?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Make that a chapter.
Okay.
It's very moving.
All right. Send me a text later.
I got
Kelly.
you.
And then I guess the last question we have here is, how do you take a bet on yourself, or how have you taken a bet on yourself? I feel like we can answer this question for you, but
No.
go
Well,
ahead.
tell me what you think first.
Honestly, you've taken a bet on yourself from the very beginning. From the moment when that gentleman passed you on, you said, no, I'm going to do something about it. I think I belong here. I'm worthy, and why not me? And you sent that letter. And I think it started from that moment.
Yep. I agree with you.
Yeah.
And I'll add one other thing. When I was maybe a year and a half in to ESPN, a man that I interned for in Colorado when I was in college got a job at ESPN as an anchor. His dream job. So excited to see him. He's like the good. There were two guys that I worked for. One was the mean one, and one was a nice one. And this was a nice one. And he moved to be at ESPN. He had just gotten married. He's 37, a runner, super fit. And he came into the office one day, and someone called for him. And I was like, oh, I'll transfer it back to your desk. It was his 6th day in the office. And shortly afterwards, somebody came running around the corner and said, does anybody know CPR? Does anybody know CPR? And I did, and my roommate at the time, Peggy Kaczynski, did. And so we ran around the corner, and it was Peter. And he was on the floor, and it was just something I never expected to see. And we thought, is he choking? Is he whatever? It ended up that Peter's heart stopped while we were there on the phone with 911. And I'll tell you guys something that kind of always gives me chills still, but basically I felt like his soul leave his body. Okay. It was just wild. In any event, he passed away and went to the hospital because at that point they were still trying to revive him. And I remember his wife came in, and they'd been married less than a year, and she had been running, and your mind kind of zeroes in on things. I think I was 22 years old at the time. And there was like the sweat stain on the back of her shorts, her running shorts, because she had just moved there and been out for a run, and her brand new husband died. And I remember thinking, if you can be 37 and fit and get your dream job and have it all taken away in a second, I'm not going to wait for anything ever again in my life. Like that was my moment. And I think that Peter's passing, which I've written about kind of extensively, has really been a guiding point in my life that I didn't expect. But that's where I get a lot of that. Why not me? I never say maybe later, ever, for anything, because it can all go away. We've heard it. I saw it as a really young person developing. And I think I went on my first international trip later that year and have just never stopped.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
I know how to kill a conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
Soaking it in.
Yeah. Same.
Yeah.
It was a very positive lesson I learned from a really awful experience. And I heard after I wrote about it, I heard from Peter's brother saying how much he really enjoyed what I wrote, because there were a few other details, that I shared about. I'm telling you, it was wild with the soul thing. That's a whole different deal, but it was definitive and wild. Yeah.
Yeah. Is there anything else you guys wanted to add?
No, this was great.
Is
Thank you so much for coming.
Oh, my pleasure.
Thanks for making time for us, girl.
Yeah, super fun. Thanks for making me sit down and stop doing all the stuff I'm doing at home, running around, because I was gone for so long, and my family did nothing while I was gone. So like all the plants are dead and all the laundry. Everybody knows how to do their laundry, and stuff's broken. So I've been back for 1 week, and I have just been fixing things. And I think more than anything, the kids were really happy that I came here with you today, because they are all, I'm sure, sitting down right now, because the rest of them, I'm like, you up. Yeah. What is that on the wall? Get it off. And everything.
Start throwing the soil at each other.
Yeah, exactly. So so they're getting a rest. So thanks for giving the kids a rest and for having me on.
Oh, of course.
We loved having you on. Loved hearing your stories. And this is the Bet on Her podcast.
And cut.
Good job, everybody.